some time ago on blade forums, I remember quite clearly somebody made a comment criticizing some of the things I was writing. And it's funny how certain things stick in your head. And I remember after I read that comment having both an amazing source of amusement and sadness at the same time by the level of ignorance displayed in the comment towards science. And all I was thinking is, somebody gotta be out there teaching this, and that's crazy. It'd be like asking me to teach ballet. I'm pretty sure I could give it a shot, and I don't know what would come out of it, but it wouldn't be anything resembling ballet. The guy made a comment that his biggest problem with the arguments that I make, and in particular the experience that I talked about when I referenced my own work, was that my experiments always confirmed what I knew. And it's hard to react to that because of course your experiments reflect what you know, because if they don't, you change what you know to match the experiments. That's the purpose of doing an experiment, to know something. It's staggering that people don't understand science to that extent. Now, of course, you could ask, well, why don't you talk about all of these experiments that some don't work, they never go anywhere because the experiment malfunctions or backfires or you never get to complete it. And of course you don't hear about those because often they fail to produce any results. Sometimes they can never be duplicated, so you chalk it up to something that you don't understand, put a check mark on it, and we get a chance to revisit it. And what people do talk about is the experiments that they've validated by repeating them a number of times, which makes sense, that they can verify independently through exterior resources and stuff like that. So of course what you know is confirmed by your experiments. But you don't know everything, unfortunately. And you're ignorant about things much more than you know things. So as you do experiments, you learn. And oftentimes when you do an experiment, the result of it is quite unexpected. So I just wanted to give an example of one of those times. I was writing up some commentary on this. This is a soft Arkansas stone. Very basic one, nothing fancy. And I was just doing some work with it, some sharpening. And at the end of it, I just wanted to write a blurb about what steels you should use it with, because I normally talk about that when I talk about stones. And I'll give a link down into the description about the discussion forum thread. So of course, like everyone else, you can't use these with hard, modern, high carbide steels. They just don't cut. So I said, well, I'm not going to just say that. Let's actually do the experiment so I can actually know it. So I use this, which is an Ozark Traditional Knife Works EDC K390, which is a 10V class steel, 64 Rockwell. So I mean, very few knives are going to be harder to grind than this unless you go with like Maximet or 121 Rex at around 70 Rockwell. I have a few of them, but they're on the extreme side of extreme. This one is sort of, you can find production knives now in 10V and S90V and S110V, so I figured it would make a good case for production knives that would be difficult to sort of sharpen. So before I sharpened it or set the apex, I prepared the bevel by grinding it with this, which is a Nanoa Superstone 400. The surface is quite dirty. I leave it with the slurry on it. I don't bother to clean it off. This is a splash and go stone, though it can benefit from a bit of a soak. It generates a very fine silty slurry, and that basically mineralizes the burr formation. It makes it rather difficult to set the final finish of the apex. Don't use it for that. But for the first stage, where I'm just preparing the edge to take the micro bevel, great stone, generates that slurry with a very, very low pressure. Very low pressure. And again, more details on this in various links on the discussion forum. So after I had ground the edge, I then polished it with this. This is a Nanoa Atoshi 2000 grit stone, slightly higher than the super stone, but still generates a fine slurry under very low pressure. Again, I don't clean this off. This also benefits from slight soak if you're going to use it for an extended period of time. But I mean, I do around 25 to 50 passes per side with this, so I normally just spritz it with water, and it's fast enough to remove the scratches from the 400 grit stone and put an air mirror finish on it. And that then puts me in perfect position to set the micro bevel. Now, of course, what I expected to happen was nothing. And at most, I expected this stone to sort of burnish the edge and flip it from side to side. But first thing I did was resurface this stone with some loose grit silicon carbide. These are solid chunks of abrasive and novaculite, which is a form of quartz, which is silicon dioxide. So they don't release abrasive as such. It's just a solid rock, a big chunk of mainly quartz silicon dioxide. So as you use them, the surface gets smooth, the abrasive wears, and they get very slick. So you periodically have to recondition them. And what I like to do is keep one side that you almost never use, and that's your reference point. So whenever you think the side that you mainly use is getting a bit slick, you turn over your reference point, give a few passes, feel the aggression, then go back to your front side and check that. And if it feels a bit slick, now you know you have to recondition it. So that gives you your reference point. So anyway, recondition the face of it, and you don't have to do it very rarely. I only use this to set micro bevel, so I mean it's months pass before I had to recondition it. But you're looking at anyway somewhere beyond, say, 1,000 passes on the stone, and then you just give it a few light scrubs, maybe 10 seconds, and you're good to go. So I took it 15 degrees per side, put the micro bevel on, and immediately I was surprised because it didn't feel slick. It felt abrasive. It felt like the stone was cutting the knife. I checked it under magnification. More surprised. It put a micro bevel on. Shaved both sides of the edge as if it had cut a micro bevel on. And now I'm not going to claim this is the sharpest edge you can produce, because I didn't think it was going to happen, so I really wasn't paying any attention to it and trying to do it carefully, because again, I didn't think it was going to be abrasive at all, so I wasn't trying to do it carefully. But anyway, it's not bad. So it does a push cut on newsprint. Now, didn't expect that to happen. So I started doing some checking on the hardness of quartz. Unfortunately, a lot of times what you hear is somebody repeating something or something that someone else said. And a lot of times this information starts getting rounded out and made a bit more vague, and then that becomes the information that's passed on. It's like you go to a photocopier and you take a copy and then you give it to someone, he takes a copy. After about 10 times, if you're not always going back to the original, it can get distorted. So what I started looking for was some actual academic references to hardness testing done. And the thing that I was looking for in particular was somebody that tested the different orientations of a crystal. Because crystals have structures. Those structures, when they load, will have different strengths, different hardnesses, depending on how you load them, the faces that you actually load them on. So there should be multiple hardnesses for quartz, and that's what I was looking for. And I also wanted exact measurements. I didn't want something rounded off. I found it, put the link and the information down in the description, and based on that Vickers hardness, which is quite high, it will easily cut any knife steel. Now, it won't cut the harder carbides because it's still softer than even chromium carbide and much softer than tungsten and vanadium carbide. But you're mainly forming the steel, not the actual carbides. So I wouldn't argue that, I mean, this is the best stone to micro bevel, a very hard, especially very high carbide steel, like high-speed steel, because there's a high chance it will burnish it. If you were going to micro bevel those steels, there are better stones. DMT's plates work really nice. So do Atoma's plates. If you want traditional stones, the Norton stones, this is silicon carbide one, or the fine India work well in the lower grits. In higher grits, it's relatively hard to find oil stones, so you might have to work with Japanese water stones. But setting edge bevels on Japanese water stones is kind of tricky because you don't want to have the slurry there because that'll impact into the edge and round it off. So you're looking for a very hard Japanese water stone, and you have to do things like make sure the surface is very flat, spray with just a little bit of water, let them dry out. It gets a bit finicky to generate a very clean apex. So I normally would prefer diamond plates unless I wanted to play around and do something with the stones. But just wanted to make a note and actually just show you that not all experiments actually come out as if you thought you knew something. But now, of course, from this point on, when I talk about these stones, it reflects the experiment because that's what I know now. The experiment, based on the research that I did, confirms that the hardness of quartz is high enough to actually cut these steels, explains the results. So now that's what I know. So now what I know, of course, confirms to experiment. Just as a word in regards to this knife, continuing to hate this lightning strike carbon fiber or whatever you want to call it that has these little bits of copper in it, this is just extremely annoying. They keep, you can hear them now catching, coming up through the handle, and you think you have it nice and smooth and you're out working and all of a sudden one of them just digs into your hand. It's kind of crazy that people use it. The other thing that I want to mention is that I really wish, as a solemn request, that knife makers who are interested in making practical using knives take at least one of their knives, use it very roughly, very extensively for all the dirty hard cutting that you normally do, sharpen it with hand stones, and just get a feel for how your knife works. This one looks like it doesn't have any problems. I had to recut this shoulder down. It didn't actually come like that, and that's because of one of the sharpening issues I had. When I sharpen, I like to adjust the angle of the blade on the stone, not the angle up or down this way, the angle this way. So if you sharpen like this, you get a scratch pattern that runs from the spine out towards the edge. So the teeth look like this. They look sort of like my fingers. They stick straight out like that. If you tilt the blade on the stone like this, you can make the scratch pattern change direction, so you can make your teeth point like this, or you can make your teeth point like that. If you make your teeth point backwards like that, the knife cuts very aggressively if you slice towards you. If you make your teeth point like that, the knife slices more aggressively if you push away from you. That's very difficult, so I normally make them slice back that way. So anyway, if you have the knife on a stone like this, I found that I was developing a recurve at the base of this blade right here. And the reason why it happens is because the knife isn't ground all the way back, and this area right here, and especially the plunge, is much thicker. So when the knife is on the stone, it took me a while to realize it, there's a bit of rocking that happens right at that level. And that rocking means that there's preferential grinding right in this area right here that tends to get more abrasion. So even though I would be doing a uniform number of passes on the stone, and it would look like I was grinding everything, that little tiny rocking motion was causing preferential grinding right there. So what I had to do with this knife now to sharpen it is keep the knife 100% straight like this, be very careful not to have that rocking, and then on the end, when I want to set the micro bevel, I'll adjust the position of the stone and the knife to get that pattern in just a few passes. So again, it's one of the things that really sincere wish that knife makers would take their knives, use them for that dirty hard cutting that you normally use cheap throwaway knives for, most people do anyway, and sharpen their knives on hand stones to get a feel for how they work. And I think they'd really start to appreciate not only what steels worked and what steels didn't, but if you're power sharpening and you're not using your knives very much, you have a very different understanding of edge retention, edge durability, and all these things, because you really don't see a lot of it. Very nice handle shape on this though. This sort of deep notch right here is popularized by Fred Perrin. A number of people use it. Collie Harris does it a lot too. Udo uses it as well. I never thought I'd like it as much as I did, but it's really, really nice. I thought it'd be too focused of a grip, but it's not. It's very generic. You can use it in a lot of grips, and it gives you very high security without actually interfering with ergonomics much. It's a very nice design. The shoulders of this should be rounded a bit more though, because when you do pinch grips up on the knife, you can feel this hard ridge. That should be cut off. Nice skull crusher pommel there for when the Zambies come out. You can give them a good root with that, I guess. Nice knife. Anyway,